I paid off $90,000 in student debt in 3 years, and today I'm going to tell you the 3 things you can start doing today to help you get a little bit closer to whatever financial goal you want. I graduated in May of 2020 as a chemical engineer, and I started my job in June of that year where I was making about $60K a year. But before we go into what I was doing then, I have to go back to college to tell you where all of my financial habits started. I went to a school where it was very expensive. That's why I graduated with so much debt. And living on campus was also very expensive. So I decided to get an apartment with a few friends right off campus. It was just about a 10-minute walk to the campus. And I was in charge of the utilities. They were all in my name, so I had to pay them every month. And I also had to pay for the rent. When I first wanted to get an apartment, I made a deal with my mom who was willing to help me out, and she was going to pay for rent, but financial situation changed, and now the rent was up to me, and so were the utilities. So I had to find jobs in college. I had about 15 jobs in college, random jobs. Some I did for a few months, some it was for a few days, but all of it was helping me build a little amount of money, but also to pay off about $800 of expenses every month. And which was quite a bit because I didn't have a high-paying job, which I did when I graduated. So I had to get very clear with what I valued and what I didn't, and that is step number 1. What do you value? Do you value your freedom? Do you value your time? Do you value your ability to make choices without other people telling you what you can and can't do? And I realized that everything I was doing was trying to give myself freedom because I didn't want to depend on my mom or anyone else. I had to depend on the bank to pay my student loans, but that is about as much as I was willing to hand off. And even though she couldn't pay for it either, I also didn't want to depend on her because she has her own life and didn't have to and shouldn't have to pay for mine. I was over 18. I could figure it out. So I did, and that is what really honed in how I was making the money and where I was spending it. I still enjoyed college. I did 2 abroad trips that were almost 3 months each that I fully paid for myself, and it was really a great experience because I got to work for so many cool different organizations while I was in school and different people. I worked for just about anything that I could get paid for. I was a building manager at my college. I worked at a local consignment shop. I worked as a teacher's assistant and a research assistant, which I could do on my own time, which I would do when I was sitting at my building manager job because I had to be at the building to manage it. And I didn't really have a lot to do for the job except sit there, so I would do my other jobs where I also got paid. So I was getting paid twice to be in the same location. So that was cool. So remote work was always a part of my life, and I worked for teachers, I worked side gigs, I painted a fence with friends, and I even got my friends' jobs. So there was a big movement of money, and I was just used to that. There's another job. There's always something else that you could do to make more money, and I wanted to have money so that I could have my freedom, and I wanted to build enough and save enough so that if I didn't want to work for a month or 2 months, I could and continue to afford stuff, which we will get back to later on, how that is my current goal, is to not have to work or to choose working instead of having to work. But this was a really good foundation, and I realized that my values were freedom. I wanted to be free to do what I wanted with the money and free from what other people wanted me to do. So what are your values? What do you value? That is going to indicate to you and to the world through how you spend your money. And if you aren't exactly sure what I mean by values, there's so many different value sheets that you can do and value exploration activities that you can do, and I'm going to link a few of them down below because I think it's so important for you to know what you value. And for me, freedom and authenticity were 2 words that constantly kept coming back. Since then, I've added curiosity and creativity and the idea that beauty is also part of it, and I just wanted to become more aware, and there was always a self-awareness journey there, and I valued that. So even though that wasn't something that I was constantly thinking about, my spending habits reflected what I valued. I valued getting out of owing anyone anything. And there was a reason, and that was the same reason why I was in charge of the utilities for my apartment. I paid for all of them, and then my roommates paid me back. I didn't trust that they would get it done, because if you've ever met an 18 or 19-year-old, they're not super reliable. And I was not going to let the electricity and the heat be dependent on them. So I took it over. That also meant that I needed to have another $300-400 in my bank account every single month. But that was okay, because and sometimes they wouldn't pay me back on time. So I had to make sure there was enough money in my account to cover whatever they were or weren't getting me. So I was very interested in having as much work as I could, but also saving as much as I could, because that's what I valued. So what do you value? Let me know down below, but also go and explore it. It's really important and something that's going to change over time, but usually your core values are your core values for a reason, and any reason is a good one as long as it's authentic to who you are. Now, that leads me right into step number 2, was I was very aware of what I was spending my money on and why. I knew why I was going to the grocery stores and buying whatever it was I was buying. I knew when I was going out with friends or doing fun things. It was college, so there was a lot of fun, free activities you could do at the school. Well, free in the sense that you've already paid 45 grand for the year, so you might as well enjoy all the stuff that they're using that money for you to enjoy. So I would do a lot of those free activities, but I would also become very aware of what it is that I was spending my money on, because I was checking my bank account, because I needed to know that there was enough money. So, and I did this a lot better when I was in college, was looking at my statements or looking at my bank account to see where I spent money and where I didn't. And I was very aware every time I swiped the card, how much was in the account and what was going to be coming in. So become very aware of where you're spending money and why. And you can do that a lot easier now than back in 2016. Actually, they probably had these things back in 2016. But go get a tracker. You can connect your bank account or credit card statement to these trackers, and they automatically will tell you exactly where your money is going and what it is, where, like what categories you're spending a lot of money in. I know my credit card company does this automatically, but if you want to go even deeper, you can get your own tracker and feed it. Either you can connect it directly, or you can feed the information yourself, or you can get a pen and paper and review your statement every month. This is not something that I do quite as well anymore, but these are things that we should do, because where we are spending our money is where we are spending our life's energy. And if we continue to spend it the way that we are, we're going to keep living the life that we have. And if we want to change it, we have to be aware of it. So get aware of where your money is going and why. Only you get to decide why it's going there and if that reason is good enough for you. I decided that certain things that I wanted to do weren't going to be things that I wanted to do. A lot of my friends would go out and drink at bars and all of this, and that was just not something I wanted to do. If we were gonna go out, I would enjoy it, but it didn't have to be through that lens. And I would go out to get food. I lived on a street that had like 5 restaurants that I would walk by the time I get home. And there was a time where I would indulge in it more, but then I realized that I was gaining way more weight than I needed to. And I stopped doing that. But it was because I was aware. I was like, where's my money going? Why do I have not enough in here? And I was spending too much on food. And so I started cooking more for me, and I suddenly had way more money. And these are things that I did as a college student, but these are things that we're constantly doing anyway. I spend way more money now on food, but it doesn't have to be that way. It can be whatever way you want it to. So these few things were really the foundation of why I was good with money. Now, there were other logistical things that were true for me when I graduated college. I did have this much loan debt, but I graduated during the pandemic where there were certain freezes on certain loans and interest was not accruing. That was not true for the majority of the debt. I think that was true for maybe 20K of the debt. The rest of it was very much accumulating interest because these were private loans. And you do have a 6-month grace period after you graduate college, but become aware of that yourself. Look at it, figure out what your interest rates are, and I just started paying off the ones that had higher interest, and those were my private loans that I got from the bank. And I was living in my own apartment, again, out of college. I lived with my parents from March to May, June of my last year of college, which was in 2020, because we weren't allowed to go back to campus. I was in Ghana right up until March 6th. 2 days later, the borders closed, and then I got an email from the school saying we're not allowed to come back, and I decided to stay with my family where they were instead of going back to my apartment. And then I packed up my apartment and I left. I graduated from my childhood bedroom. There was a video of the president walking across a bridge, which was emblematic of what we would do should it be our graduation. So didn't have quite the end that I wanted, and it was a crazy year because the beginning of 2020 I was in Ghana, and then I was in Cape Cod, and then I was back living with my parents in December of that year. So traveled all over, and looking on it, that was probably the least crazy year of the past 5, but here we are. So that is where I got to. So I was paying for my own apartment, and then I transitioned to about 9 months not paying for one. My parents didn't make me pay rent while I was there. They let me continue to accumulate that. So I was saving about $1,200 a month additionally, and that just went straight into my loans. But I was in the process of trying to move out, but I didn't want to just move out into another apartment. I wanted to move into my own place, which is what I did end up doing. I managed to save up enough money while continuing to pay off the loans bit by bit and get into my own place. And it was a really important experience for me. I learned a lot. I was 23 and I had bought my first property, and I was still in like 70K of debt at that point, and I had to figure it out. And right before I moved in, I accepted a job. I had about 5 weeks of renovations at the place, and then I moved in on a Saturday, and the following Monday I started a new job, and that job I was making 90K a year, which really did help with paying off those student loans a lot quicker. But my values and why I spent money and how had not changed. I wasn't into any flashy things. I wasn't spending a great deal of money on the big ticket items. I had a car that I got in the pandemic. It was a gift from my family. My brother had been saving up money for a car for me since I was 18, and at 22 we had saved up about $1,500, and then my parents came up with the rest, and the car cost about $2,500. So we paid for it flat out, and now I had a car that I could drive places. And fortunately for me, that car helped me pay a good deal of the loans off because I got paid mileage when I went to sites. So I had driven about 70,000 miles on that car in the past 5 years, and I was probably paid for about 50,000 of those. So the car was actually like another way I was making money. There was some repairs on it, but it's actually a really good car. I still have it. I haven't transitioned away from it, but it has been a big reason why I saved a lot of money. And when people do start to make more money like that, they usually want to go out and buy flashy things, but it did not align with my values or why I wanted to spend money or where I wanted to be. I rather have this car that was efficient and it got me where I needed to be and it was safe, and pay off this debt that I don't have to have if I work on it. So all my extra money was going into the loans. I did still travel. I went to California a few times. I went to Iceland a few times, but it was mostly, a lot of the money was going to my student debt, because to me, I wanted to be free of that and to be able to use my paycheck however I wanted to, and to not have to work for a certain place because I needed to maintain a certain amount of money. And that was also very important, which brings me to topic number 3 is, where are you going? What is the goal of this saving money, of paying off debt? What is the goal? What are you trying to get to? What does the future look like when you no longer have this thing, or when you do have this thing that you're working towards? How are you getting there? And what does it mean to you? I wanted to pay off all of my student debt so that I did not owe anyone anything, and there was no more money that was going into this. I felt like my degree had done everything that it could for me, and continuing to pay for it wasn't actually an investment anymore. I got the degree, I got the jobs that I wanted, and it was very important for me. And I wanted to get rid of it to prove to myself that I could do it. So in October of 23, I made my final payment. I had paid off the highest interest rates first, and then I started on the lower interest rates, and then at the end, I was at the ones that weren't accumulating interest because of the pandemic. The pandemic was they gave a grant during the pandemic for us to not have to pay interest on certain education loans. So I saved those for last and was starting to pay those off. And then there was at one point they were saying that maybe 10,000 of your debt could be forgiven if you had those loans, which I did. And I left 10 grand and I had 10 grand saved in my savings account. So once they decided that they weren't going to do that, I just paid it off. And then October 5th of 23, I paid it all off. And, you know, I thought that there would be this huge parade and fanfare and a congratulations from them. But no, I literally just got a letter that said the balance in the account is 0, which honestly was super cool. And I don't even have those letters anymore. I thought it'd be such a huge accomplishment, and I was working so hard towards this for 2 years. But honestly, since I started college, and there wasn't this big fanfare. Neither was there when I bought my place that I lived in. It was just me accepting the offer, or hearing that they accepted the offer, and I was alone in my room. And I was also alone in my room when I got the email that all of my loans had been paid off. So what I had to realize was, what was I gonna do next? Now I had all this money, and towards the end I was paying about 4 grand a month just to get rid of the loans. Do I suggest going into this much debt, going into all of this, paying it off this quickly? That's up to you, and only you can decide that. You have to decide what your future needs from you and how you're going to get there. If you want to pay off your debt really quickly, if you don't, that's up to you, but you need to know what your money's doing and why. So it got me to this point, and I was really excited because now all of a sudden all this money I had was for me. And I really didn't have much saved up because I was throwing everything into my loans. And I had maybe a few grand in my bank account once I paid off the loans, and then I was starting to save up a little bit more. I believe I went to San Francisco that winter to see a friend over there, and then, or maybe I didn't, that could have been a different year. And then in February of 24, I lost that job, and it was a very difficult time. But I'm also very grateful for the time that it happened, because I didn't have any more debt, and I had enough money that I could cover my mortgage for a few months while I figured out what I was going to do next. And it was just a really valuable place and lesson for me to realize, like, oh my God, like, no job is secure. And having debt really ties you to the place that you are and what you're doing, because you have to pay it off. And if I had lost that job and I still had all this debt, I would be in a worse position than I was financially. I was in a pretty bad place emotionally, but I could have been in that same place financially. And it was a really pivotal point for me to realize, like, oh, this game, you can be kicked out of it at any point. People can decide whatever they want at any point, and you have to deal with the consequences. So I had maybe now again $6,000 saved up, and I had to figure it out. I had enough money in my mortgage to cover my mortgage, and I was able to get unemployment for a little bit while I figured things out as well. Not as easy to get, and there are so many more steps to it than you would think. But yeah, there was this whole shift in my life in a span of a few months, and the following 2 years from, well, almost 2 years from February 2024 has been a whirlwind experience, which I will continue to talk about in the next few weeks. But that is how I did it. That is how I got there. Do I recommend it? In some ways, yes. In other ways, no. Don't do it if you think it's going to hold you back in any way. But also the debt is holding you back. This was just my experience. This is what I did. I am happy that I'm here now without the debt and not having to worry about it, because now all the money I do make is mine to figure out what to do with. And that was something that I didn't really think about, was what am I gonna do with the money when I have it? Which is why I started this book and really looking into financial independence and how do I get to a point where I'm no longer dependent on other people and a job and all of these things that can be taken away at a moment's notice. And not only did I lose that job that I had for 3 years, but then I got a new job and lost that job. And then the current job I'm at, they announced layoffs about 6 months after I started there. So the belief that a job is a secure place and income is really not the reality anymore. And I know a lot of people are facing very difficult times. There's been thousands and thousands of people laid off with everything going on in the world. And I want you to feel empowered again and to realize that your power has always been within you. And that was the conclusion that I had to come to crawl my way out of the emotional turmoil and just the crashing of my identity. I was really completely absorbed by that job, and I did so much for it, and I felt like I was doing amazing, and then it all crashed. And that can happen at any point until you are in a place where you're fully in control of your financial future. And it does take time, and it's going to continue to take time until I get there. But every single step encourages knowledge, and it's up to you to take your power back. So I hope you take your power back. We will continue to talk about this. FIRE is financial independence or retire early. I had heard about this term vaguely from some YouTubers, but then I really dove into it these past few months, inspired by the people around me, and just coming to terms that I don't want to work for somebody forever, because honestly, having someone control me and my future does not align with that first value I was talking about at the beginning of the video of freedom. I want to be free to make my decisions, to be in control of my schedule and what I do on a daily basis. And that starts with figuring out what to do with the money that I have now that I worked so hard to have access to. I'm still trying to figure it out. This journey is a long one, an important one, but it is one that I am excited to pursue, because you can complain about things your entire life, but at some point you have to take your power back and say, you know what, enough is enough, and actually I am in control and I get to decide. And whatever happens next, I will be able to deal with it, because I know that the power's in my hands. No matter how many jobs believe they do have that influence and control over you, there are other jobs, there are other ways to make money. Your power is yours, but it is in the awareness that your power truly lies. So I hope you can take control back. I paid it off super quick in comparison. And if that's what you want to do, all power to you, more power to you. If that's not what you want to do and you have different goals, that's amazing. And I hope that you can continue to pull on those threads and to figure out what your goals are and why. I will continue to talk about this. We have an exciting journey coming up where we are going to do this together. I will share about those 2 years from January of 24 to December of 25 in a few weeks, about what happened in that time and how did I keep track of it. So stick around for that. We're going to talk about spiritual freedom next time, and then we're going to get into that brand new journey that's going to encompass so many different things that I've learned as an engineer and as a human trying to figure it out. So I hope you got something out of today's video. I wish you the best of luck on your journey, and I hope you join this one. Have an amazing week. I'll see you very soon.